Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. It's always nice when things go according to plan or work out to how we want them to work out or how we expect them to work out. But the reality of life, whether that's our life at the workplace or life outside of the workplace, is that things don't always go as planned. They don't always work out as we expect them to. Why is this an important conversation to have? Well, first and foremost, this is a part of life. Sometimes things work out, other times they don't. But the other part of it is that whether or not things work out can really affect our experiences. And since we're talking about the workplace and our experiences at the workplace, it's important to recognize what happens when things don't work out as we plan them to, and how that affects our experience at work. The first thing to consider is this: when things do work out the way we planned or the way we expected them to, it gives us a certain sense of control. And that's regardless of whether or not we had direct control over what happened. But it still gives us that sense of peace, a sense of control, and a sense of security as a result. As you can guess, when things don't work out as we planned, no matter how much time and effort we put into planning, when they don't work out as we expected, we can feel a sense of loss of control or lack of control. And that doesn't necessarily feel good. That can also affect how secure and comfortable we feel in that environment or in that situation. So when things work out, we feel some sense of control, and it gives us a comfortable feeling or a comfortable experience. But when things don't work out, we can feel a sense of lack of control or loss of control, which can be uncomfortable in terms of how the experience goes for us. When things are unpredictable and don't go as we planned or expected for them to go, and we have that diminished sense of safety or security, that in itself can lead to increased stress and anxiety in terms of our experience at the workplace. Some people need to feel like they're more in control in order to feel safe or secure in their environment. Other people don't need as much control and are better able to handle when things don't go their way or when things are unpredictable. As you can imagine, those who are able to adapt more easily to unpredictability or simply things not working out as planned are much less likely to have to face increased stress and anxiety. But regardless of how well you do with change or unpredictability, there are ways of making that experience easier on you. And the other thing to consider while looking at this sense of control and safety at the workplace and how we deal with change and lack of predictability, we have to remember that while at the workplace, we have to keep it together. We have to remain motivated and productive. Regardless of where your personal baseline is in terms of how much control you think you need or how adaptable you are when it comes to change or lack of predictability, there are still things that everyone can do to make the inevitable experience of things not going as planned an easier experience for you. The first thing to remember is to focus on yourself. You may have heard me or other people saying that no matter what happens all around you, the only true control that you or anybody else has is the control of self. That means control of your behaviors, control of your reactions. So remember that the first thing to do is to focus on yourself. It is absolutely impossible to control all the variables of the world around you, but you are your best bet in terms of what you can actually control. And when you're at work and dealing with change or things that don't go your way, just as you can focus on your own behaviors and your own reactions to what's happening around you, so too can you focus on your own work. So sometimes it's a matter of not worrying about everything else, but rather simply focusing on your work, your tasks, and what you need to get accomplished. Focus on the here and now. It's so easy to get caught up and let our imagination run amok and come up with potential future catastrophes that may or may not happen. A much better option is to focus on the here and now. Focus on what can be done if there's something to be done, if it's appropriate for you to do something about a situation, or simply focus on your work and what you need to accomplish. Don't let your imagination take over, because that's a very easy way to get yourself derailed and let your imagination take over and put you into a state where it will neither be helpful nor productive. It may be helpful to consider what the change or unpredictability that you're facing really means. Is it something that means anything in the grand scheme of things, or is it just something that took you by surprise or maybe is irritating you simply because it's a change? If it's something that does affect what needs to be accomplished in the long term, rather than lamenting over what isn't going your way or what isn't happening as planned, why not consider other ways in which the same goal can be accomplished? Alternatives are always a good thing to have. Make sure that you're not struggling with your ego or an emotional attachment to the way things have always been done. This is something that can really sneak up on you, especially when you have put time and effort into maybe a policy or developing a way of doing things, or you've simply become accustomed to how things should be done because they've been done that way for a long time. Change isn't necessarily bad. Change can be good and it can be very beneficial. So make sure you're taking a look at that. Is this a matter of your ego getting in your way, or maybe a simple emotional attachment to the way that things have always been done up to now, and the struggle isn't really that big of a deal other than what the ego or what an emotional attachment makes it out to be? So that's something that's worth of your consideration as well when you're facing a situation that things didn't go as planned or as predicted. It may be beneficial to take some time to reflect on what's happening. After all the things that I've talked about until now really call for some introspection, some time to consider what's happening, and an approach that may be a new way of looking at things, or maybe calls for an unbiased way of looking at things. So you may want to, if the situation allows, step away, step back, and take some time to consider what's happening and what does it really mean for you and for the organization around you. You may want to take a break. Sometimes when things don't go our way, it can be frustrating, and the best thing to do can be to take an actual break. And while you're taking that break, you may want to focus on something like self-care or proactive stress reduction. Sometimes it may be appropriate to talk things over with another person. So consider if this is one of those situations where when things don't go as planned, somebody else could offer some valuable feedback or input that could help with the situation. It's important that you consider carefully who you ask for their feedback. As you probably already know, there are some people who are much more likely to give you an unbiased or neutral type of feedback that will be actually helpful to you. And there are some people who may want to stir the pot and get things more agitated. So be careful who you ask for advice on any given situation, especially one that may be irritating or disturbing to you. You don't want them to add fuel to that fire. Sometimes you have to let go of focusing on everything else around you and simply focus on your own tasks and your own work. So when this event or situation that happens that is not going the way that was planned or expected, sometimes it may have little or nothing to do with you and your work. And it's important to recognize that, because there's no reason to add more stress into your experience if you don't have to. So why not take a look at that? Zoom out, look at the big picture, and once you have a better understanding of whether or not you really even need to be in the mix, why not simply focus on your own work, your own tasks, and let the other scenario that is outside of your experience really play out as it needs to play out. Don't get caught up in other people's drama. That's another thing that can come into play. We work with other people and we interact with them regularly. So it's quite common for us to know when things don't go as expected in terms of their experience as well. So it may be all too easy to want to contribute and give feedback and, in essence, get caught up in any unnecessary things that can sometimes lead to drama at the office. That's something you want to avoid. Life can be stressful enough. Why sign up for other people's stress if you don't have to deal with it directly? And there's a big difference between helping someone and simply hitching a ride on the drama wagon. As you listen to everything I've presented here, you can see that the big takeaway here is the importance of introspection. Your ability to assess the situation, to figure out what's happening, why it may be happening, and how you should react to it, if you should get involved at all. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. When things go our way, it gives us a certain sense of control, which can bring with it a sense of comfort and a sense of peace in our experience. But we all know that that's not always what happens at work or outside of work for that matter. Change and unpredictability have the potential to derail you if you don't know how to deal with them. Introspection is key in this situation. It's important to take a look at what's happening and how we come into play in whatever the situation is, whatever the situation where things didn't work out as planned or as expected. Is this something that's really even affecting us? Or is this something where we should simply focus on our own work and our own tasks? Try focusing on the here and now rather than allowing your imagination to run wild and think up of all of the disasters that could possibly happen sometimes in the future because of whatever didn't go your way today. If need be, you should be able to think of other ways of accomplishing the bigger goal. After all, it's always good to have a second plan or a plan B for whatever we're trying to accomplish. Make sure that your ego or an emotional attachment to the way things have always been done in the past aren't getting in the way of whatever is happening now. Change isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it's important to remember that. Everybody needs a little time to reflect on what's happening. Sometimes that's just what the doctor ordered. Stepping outside of the situation and allowing yourself some time to process. You may need to take a break where you engage in stress-lowering exercises or activities, or in other self-care type of activities. Those may do you a world of good, especially when you encounter a situation when things didn't go as planned. You may want to seek the advice of others to help you process what's happening. But when you do, make sure you go to the right people so that you are not talking to someone who will simply add fuel to the fire. Be sure that you're able to tell the difference between things that affect you and things that don't. Don't get caught up in things that have nothing to do with you or your work or the drama of the office. And remember, there's a big difference between helping somebody else out and getting caught up in their drama. For those of you who are experiencing this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel where you can find this podcast in a video version. The link for that is in the description below. In addition to the video version of this podcast, my YouTube channel also contains other videos that focus on stress management, so I invite you to check it out. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.